You see, all of us have failed enough in life, fallen short, missed the mark, that we are tempted to believe that that's who we are. We've all messed up. I coach football here at the high school, and I tell the kids, like almost before every game, I can guarantee you one thing is going to happen during this game today. You're going to mess up. You cannot no one can play a perfect football game. Everyone is going to mess up. And what football teaches you is you only have about 10 to 15 seconds before you got to get back in that huddle and get to the next play. It teaches you to recover from your mistakes. You got to recover quickly, and life's just like that. But many of us, if we've fallen enough, we've messed up enough, we've made enough mistakes, we begin to believe that that's who we are. We begin to believe that that's what defines us. That's where our identity is. And that's really just a lie, is that I am defined by what I do. That's lie number 4. But the enemy wants us to believe that we are defined by what we do, or maybe for some of you, you're defined by what's been done to you. And sometimes that's even more challenging of how to recover and heal from that. But that I believe I am what I have done. Because you see, when you're winning in life, when you're successful, when everything's going your way, it's great to be defined by that. It's great to grab your identity there when you're just like, man, I am killing it. Define me as winner, you know? But what happens when you're the Cleveland Browns? And you're tired. It's great having the first round draft pick, but there's a reason why you have that first round draft pick, because you're not a winner. You're a loser. And if you're from Cleveland, I'm really sorry, but not really. Because your helmet is just orange. It's like, have you seen the logo of the Browns? It's their helmet. That's their logo. Their orange helmet. They have no logo. And it's because they lose. I'm just kidding. Okay. But it's really difficult if you're losing in life and it just feels like my dreams aren't being realized, my kids aren't exactly where I thought they'd be, my marriage isn't exactly what I had dreamed of or had hoped for. It's really challenging to say, okay, I cannot find my life in that. And when we're victorious and everything's going great, you can't reach to that either and say that's what I can find my identity and my worth in as well. And many of us, with the mistakes and the things that we've done, we start to believe the lie that I am what I've done. And when we do this, we begin to go down a path that's really unhealthy, and it's full of shame and darkness. And that's really the first thing we begin to experience. We feel shame. We believe this lie that we begin to feel shame. We go into the wardrobe every day, and instead of putting on beloved daughter, beloved son, a creation of Creator God, instead I grab a hold of shame and I clothe myself in that. Do you know my story, Peter? Do you know my past? You don't know what's happened to me or what I've done. I clothe myself in shame. I also begin to defend. I defend, and I look for people who will defend with me. I defend my past, or I defend my actions, and I begin to justify and be able to say, everything is okay, and we will defend and attack back anyone who tries to tell us what to do or how to act differently. So we begin to feel shame and defend. We also hide. This is probably where I go the most, as I begin to hide, avoid, isolate. And I'll only show you the things I think that you'll like about my life. I won't show you the ugliness, the things that really go on in my head, the things that are really in my heart. I'll only show you the best side of me, and I'll hide the rest of that away. And finally, if I begin to believe this lie long enough, my sins, my mistakes, my brokenness, my shame becomes my identity. It becomes who I am. I begin to believe this lie that I am what I have done. If you've ever been tempted to believe that you are what you have done, you're not alone. In John chapter 8, we're going to look at the story of a woman who has believed this lie. And in fact, she's kind of drug into a moment where she's forced to believe in front of crowds of people that she is what she has done. The setting for John 8 begins in John 7. We're actually in the Feast of Tabernacles, as it's called, the Feast of Shelters or Booths. And it's, once again, Jesus has a moment during a massive festival where a bunch of people would flock to the city, would come to Jerusalem to celebrate a holy day. Crowds are everywhere, and Jesus is teaching in the temple. And on the last day of the festival, at the climax of this event, where everyone's there, it's the final big hurrah, Jesus stands up and shouts, "I am the living water. Anyone who believes in me will have streams of living water. And to the religious leaders of that time, this is like tantamount to Jesus calling himself the chosen one, the Messiah. And it creates a massive, huge stir amongst the crowds and the religious leaders. So much so that evening they devise a strategy to basically trap Jesus and put him in a place in front of everyone that will discredit his leadership. This is one of their final moments in this week of this festival to say, how can we discredit this man? They come up with a plan. So the next day, Jesus returns to the temple, the crowds gather, and as Jesus is teaching in this pretty strategic moment, they interrupt. Boom! They come and break in the middle of Jesus' teaching, and they completely interrupt Jesus. They throw a woman into the middle of the crowd, and they ask Jesus a question. They say, Jesus, they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? And this is the trap. The trap that these religious leaders have found. They say, the law says to stone her. We want to know, what do you say? And they catch this woman in adultery, and they put her before Jesus in the temple in front of everybody. Because at this point, Jesus is starting to kind of gather quite a bit of people anywhere he goes, especially when he begins to teach, because he's teaching these kind of upside down ideas. And so in the midst of all of these fans, maybe some followers, probably mostly curious people about who is this guy, this moment happens. The law of Moses says this. What do you say? You see, if Jesus says, well, let's stone her, like let's follow the law, let's stone her, then the Romans have every right to take Jesus, to arrest him. He's going to prison, because under Roman law, the Jews don't have a legal right to put someone to death. Under Roman law, the Jewish law is basically powerless. And so a Jewish leader has no right to be able to put someone to death. And so it's why later Jesus had to stand trial before Pilate, because the religious leaders had no power in that day, so it had to go to Rome. So he's the only one who could had seen Jesus crucified. So if he says stone her, then he's all of a sudden throwing himself at the mercy of Roman law. But if he says don't stone her, hey, we all make mistakes, hey, it's okay, then Jesus contradicts the law of Moses in the temple on a holy day, and then most of the crowds will walk away from him saying, oh, well, he doesn't even value our traditions, he doesn't even value our law, discrediting him as a leader once again. And so they put him in this corner. They pin him in this corner. What are you going to do, Jesus? What are you going to say? And the tension is massive. There's a woman caught in the act of adultery. First, I don't exactly know how you do that. Catch someone in the act of adultery, and I actually feel like there's probably some issues going on right there if you're like, that's your plan. We're going to catch someone. And where's the man, by the way? It's just the woman, so where's the man? It's like, you don't have adultery by yourself, there's somebody else. So is the man involved in the trap? Is this a whole ugly scheme? There's all these kinds of, maybe speculations or kind of angles that people talk about when it comes to this, but there's so many things that are wrong with this moment, and they're using somebody to trap Jesus. Like, they don't even really care about this woman. The focus is not even on her. The focus is like, let's trap Jesus. What is he going to do? The scriptures say that Jesus stooped down and he begins to write. Continue on in verse 6. It says, they were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him, but Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. This is a pretty intense moment. And Jesus, what seems like Jesus in maybe some kind of weird psychotic episode, Jesus stoops down and starts to write in the dirt. And you're kind of like going, what's Jesus doing here? We actually don't know, but we do have some educated guesses. What are the the religious people focused on? They're focused on the law, the obedience of the law. Not just the law, but it's their interpretation of the law. And the big three things that they were always constantly working to interpret right and to get everybody on their side, the big three were circumcision, Sabbath keeping, and dietary law. What you eat and who you eat with. So he's talking about those things, those were the main things, and those tended to be the things that Jesus kind of always picked at. Okay, who am I eating with? Am I eating with the wrong people? Am I eating the wrong things? My disciples aren't washing their hands. There's things about like, it's the Sabbath day. We're supposed to keep it holy and do no work. And Jesus is healing people on the Sabbath. He's doing work on the Sabbath, circumcision. There's all of these things of just like about the law. And there's this one law that Jesus keeps coming after. And it's the fourth law in the Ten Commandments. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. You see, God created the heavens and the earth, and then at the end of it, he made a kind of this big statement to all of humanity that he rested. He rests, and he says, everyone in the world is living like crazy, busy lives, but with you, it's going to be different. The rest of the world, there's no break for their souls, no rest for the weary, but for you, it will be different. There will be rest. But this gift that God intended for all of humanity gets turned around and all of a sudden begins to become this rule that's run through this filter that's constantly attacked and constantly placed over people. This gift that God was giving to us all of a sudden has become this rule that's been followed to the nth degree. And one of the popular teachings of the day was that you couldn't write with a writing utensil on the Sabbath because that was considered work. So you couldn't write with like a pen. But one of the loopholes was you could write in the dirt with your finger because the wind would just blow that away and somehow they wouldn't call that work. Loophole. Okay. So that was one of the popular teachings of the day, and Jesus is with this woman who's been caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? And Jesus stoops down and begins to write in the dirt with his finger. And by writing in the dust, he's sending a message, and they get it. This man understands the law. He knows what we're after here. What is he writing? We don't know. There's some speculation. Maybe he's writing something to the woman. Maybe he's writing something to the religious leaders to send some message or to get a point across. But the culture will always give you two options when they are trying to trap you. But Jesus always seemed to have an unexpected third way. I don't know if any of you are like me where you've read the Gospels and you're just like, how did Jesus just not get trapped? It just seemed like at one point where Jesus was like, you got me there, guys. Well, it's like, not everyone's perfect. I'm expecting that moment, but it's like he always seems to find this third way. So we continue on in verse 6 and 8. It says, they kept demanding an answer. While he's writing in the dust, they're wanting an answer. Answer us. This is what the law of Moses says. What do you say? So he stood up again and said, all right. But let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. He's like, okay, you want to go there? Jesus is like, you want to go there? We'll go there. All right. But let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. And then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. Jesus all of a sudden is like, you want to try and trap me? All right, two can play this game. And he stands up and he says, that's fine, we can play this game, we can abide by the law. But let the first of you, let the one who's never sinned be the first one to go. So he puts them in their own trap. Because what happens? If someone throws a stone, what are they saying? Well, I've never sinned. And all of a sudden they're like, okay, well there's an issue. There's some blasphemy going on right here. So religious leaders are like, I can't exactly throw this stone because then I'm making the statement to everybody here. I haven't sinned. And he's like, Then all of a sudden, so there's one. If I throw the stone, there's that. And since it's against Roman law for Jews to carry out capital punishment for religious offenses, Jesus is like, fine. He's basically saying, if I'm going to go down, you're all going down with me then. Because Rome's not going to stand for it, so go ahead. You throw the first stone, and if I'm going down, you're going down with me, suckers. And Jesus is like, you want to play the trap me game? I can play this game. He's like, and all of a sudden, they're standing there. Jesus is focused on this woman. And from the oldest to the youngest, it said, when the accusers heard this, it says this in verse 9, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. And at some point in your life, it could even be in a crowd, it could be all alone, but at some point in your life, it's going to come down to this moment. It's you, and it's Jesus. And all the accusing voices have been silenced. Your past has all been, put away for the moment, and it's you, and it's Jesus. And there's a moment for all of us where we have to believe that Jesus can actually change my story. And I'm wondering if that's today for some of you. That you've come in here with all kinds of accusations, many times from your own mouth, looking at your own past, or maybe it's from a parent, or from some leader in your life, or from a friend, or maybe there's been abandonment, or someone's told you, identified or labeled you by something they've said to you. And there comes a point where we have to be face to face with Jesus and have this moment where we begin to say, Jesus, I believe. Jesus, I believe that I think that you can change my story. And I'm going to give you the pen. I'm going to give you a shot to write a new chapter. See, God is not looking for you to comply to his story. He wants you to believe. He wants you in the depths of your heart to embrace the idea that maybe Jesus is who he says he is. And I can believe that what he says will come true. We sing about his promises. Sing about how God's promises are faithful and they're true and they're good. And there comes that moment where God says, I'm not asking you to comply. Do you believe in my promises? Do you believe that I can fulfill them? That I can be faithful with them? Because that's what will change your story. If you only comply, then at some point you're not going to follow Jesus, and we're going to kind of spiral out of control at some point. But if we begin to believe, regardless of our circumstances and where our life goes, our belief can still trust it. It's not based upon my faithfulness, although God calls us to follow him faithfully. Really, our story depends on the faithfulness of God, which will never let us down. Is this your come to Jesus moment today? Is this your moment where you're here face to face with Jesus and the accusers are gone? Everything has been silenced and Jesus looks at you and says, will you believe? And later on today, we're going to talk about that. Will you say yes to Jesus today? That's what we're here for. To be able to let that be clearly heard. That Jesus is saying to all of us, you are mine. Let the one without sin be the first to throw the stone. And one by one they leave, starting with the elder. Starting with the eldest. It was definitely an honor culture in that day where they would look to the oldest and be like, well, Jesus posed a question. I'm sure the young ones are probably all like, just like foaming at the mouth, just like ready, like, man, I've been working on this. And then they're like, okay, we've got to look to the old guy. And then he drops a stone and leaves, and they're just like, and I could see this, I don't know, I picture these things, this moment where there's this young guy just foaming, steam coming out the ears, and he's like, oh, my loser religious friends have all left, and then they realize, well, I got nothing here, and drops it, and just kind of puffs away, and just kind of all angry. Where are your accusers now? It says that Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? No, Lord, she said. And then Jesus said, neither do I. Go and sin no more. Jesus walks that razor-thin line of truth and grace. You're not guilty. You're free. Now go and live a new life. Go and live out the story that I am changing. The sin that was a part of your past will not be a part of your future. The darkness that you have hidden, you are going to come out, step out into the light, and live in this new story that I am writing for you. Jesus says, you are a new creation. You are my child, a woman, a man of God. Now go and live in your real identity. You see, the lie that we believe is that I am what I have done, but the truth that we want us all to believe today is I am what Jesus has done. See, our lens and our focus is so much upon me and what I've done and what I've said and how I've acted. And what the story of really the Bible is let's have our lens be what has Jesus done, and therefore what do I do with that? That our identity is found in that one place, in what Jesus has done. And when we begin to believe this truth, here are a few things I think will begin to happen in our lives. The first thing is this: I stop defending what I have done. I stopped needing to defend my past and justifying it, or being able to try to tell people the whole story. I mean, I don't know if any of you have ever been there, but I've been in moments where people are like, you have to tell them the whole story, Peter. They don't know it. They're going to make judgments or draw conclusions about your character, about who you are. And it's like, how about I just cling to Jesus' story and let that be enough? I don't have to continue to defend my story any longer. You see, when we get defensive, We begin to be surrounded by people with stones, and we want to protect ourselves because rocks hurt. Maybe we probably never found ourselves in this kind of Old Testament kind of place where people literally have stones, but we know that people have stones and they want to throw them at us and they want to begin to define us and label us. Some of you have been hit by the painful words that people have said, that you're stupid, that you're ugly, that you're unvalued, unwanted, unneeded. I wish I never had you. You're a loser, you always will be. You don't belong here. You are nothing. You've heard that. You've seen the stones. You've seen the accusations. We've all been hurt by words. I've been hurt by words, and you have. And somehow, we can hang on to them. I still hang on to the moment. And I honestly don't think it's still a wound, but I can still hear the moment in 5th grade where I played baseball 1 year. Kind of see where I'm going here with this. 1 year. It was 5th grade. And I can still remember the moment in a game where it was like, it wasn't the end of the game, but it was definitely like there's certain humans on base and certain outs, and I'm up at the plate, like the pressure moment, and I go up there and leave everybody on base, and I strike out, and walking out from the dugout, some of you are like, I've been there, done that a lot. Walking out to the dugout, I overhear a kid, and I'm just talking to you about right now, I overhear a kid, and this is what he says, I hate blue. As we're walking out to the field, because I was horrible at baseball. I hated baseball. Played it 1 year. That was the only one. And I can still hear it. I don't even know what kid said anymore, but I can hear those words. I hate blue. And I can still remember it. Now, honestly, I hope I'm not so wounded if I'm talking on a microphone to all of you about it. It was 5th grade baseball. Who cares? But those words, they stay with us. You can hear them. And many of you, it's much deeper than a dumb 5th grade Little League moment. You've heard words from people that you care about, that you love. They're from a parent, from a sibling, from a spouse, from a dear friend. And they stay with us. They begin to identify. They begin to label. And we begin to believe that. And when I begin to believe the truth that I am what Jesus has done, I don't have to defend or justify or continue to retell the story over and over again. I get to hold on to what Jesus has done and begin to retell and replay his story over and over again. He came and he sacrificed for me, that I was worth it enough that he would give his life, that all things could be redeemed and all things could be made whole, and I don't have to live in the past, that I have a bright future. I don't have to live in the shadows, that I can come out into the light and I can replay Jesus' story over and over again and stop believing the lies and don't allow them to identify me any longer. You see, some of you have been hurt. You've gotten tired. You've become weary by your past. And instead of standing there trying to throw stones back, instead of getting in a stone throwing fight, cling to the story of Jesus. What has he done? That's who you are. What does he say? That's who you are. You see, when Jesus changes your story, you can drop your shield, no longer have to be defensive. You don't have to fight any longer. We can stop defending what we have done. We can also bring our brokenness to Jesus. You see, when I believe that I am what Jesus has done, is I bring my brokenness to Jesus, because Jesus heals every wound from your past. Now, some wounds take longer to heal. Oh, I was just telling someone earlier, I got this shoulder issue, and when you're over 40, when you start saying I got this shoulder issue, that's when you know you're old, right? Just like, it's like, when I'm like, I got this shoulder issue. It's like, man, you're over 40, things take forever to heal. I remember it'd be like, I'd fall down and be like, 2 days, I'm good, we're here to go. And I'm like, I got shoulder issues. And some of us, we're just trusting Jesus, and some wounds take longer to heal. Some injuries, because you played them for so long in your head, what your mom said about you, you've played it on loop over and over and over and over and over again. But I believe that Jesus redeems all things, and he wants to heal every wound. But some of them, he has to heal that wound because you've played it so many times in your head, it's hard to hear the voice of the Good Shepherd, because all I can hear is the voice of my mom, or the voice of my dad, or the voice of that teacher, or the voice of that coach. And I replay it over and over again. But I believe that every hurt is healed in Jesus' name. And by his wounds, by his stripes, he took on the punishment He took it on, and by that we're healed. We find our healing and our wholeness. And whenever the enemy brings up your past, I used to hear this phrase growing up when evangelists would come, like I go to camp, and like, whenever the devil reminds you of your past, they'd say, just remind him of his future. And I'd be like, yeah, I like that one. But actually, I like this one better. When the enemy reminds you of your past, Jesus just shows you his hands and his feet. He says, all things are made new. All things are redeemed. All things are healed. All things are restored. And today, I'm asking, what brokenness do you finally need to bring to Jesus? And maybe for some of you, you're also going, I'm just hearing this. It just hit me for the first time, Peter. It's going to have to take me some time because I've been playing things over and over and over again. And Jesus is like, bring your brokenness to me. Come to Jesus. Be healed. I love Ezekiel 36:26. It says, I will give you a new heart, and I will put a new spirit in you. Some of you, that's going to happen today. I'm going to give you a new heart. Put a new spirit inside of you. I will take out your stony, stubborn heart and give you a tender, responsive heart. No longer a heart that just feels jaded, a heart that feels calloused, but a tender and responsive heart that hears the voice of Jesus, follows him, and responds to what he's saying. You see, when I believe that I am what Jesus has done, then I begin to live with a new identity. I begin to live with a brand new identity. It's not based upon what I've done, but it's based upon what he has done. And it's more than just getting right with God one time. It's about receiving your new identity as people of the light and walking with him daily. You see it? Just like you replayed those lies, those scenarios, that story, just like you've replayed that over and over and over again, Jesus is going to play over and over and over again this new identity that you are my daughter, you are my son, I love you, you are valued, you are an heir to the kingdom. You don't have to walk in darkness any longer. I love what Isaiah prophesied about the Messiah, saying that the people who walk in darkness will see a great light. For those who live in a land of deep darkness, a light will shine. And today we can step out of the shadows of a broken, wounded story and step into God's glorious light and believe what he has to say. Jesus didn't come to tell you, I love this, Jesus didn't come to tell you what to do. Many of you are just like, okay, I'm reading the Bible and I just want it to tell me what to do. Jesus came to tell you who you are. That you're his. I think that so many times I read the Bible just being like, okay, this is going to tell me what to do. Instead of seeing it as the story of God and God declaring to all of creation, all of humanity, who they are. You are beloved. You are a masterpiece of the Creator. And start believing that. Start telling that story over and over again. And I believe if we continue to tell that story, our stories will begin to change. I'm going to ask the band to come and we're going to pray and wrap up this morning. And the thing I want you to consider, it's kind of an action step. It's kind of an interesting one, but I want you to agree with Jesus on something. Agree with Jesus on who he says you are. Because many of you are like, I hear what Jesus is saying. That's kind of nice. I like the idea of that. But today I want some of you to agree with him on it. Agree with Jesus. What has Jesus done? What has Jesus said? It says that Jesus died once and for all. We don't keep nailing him back on the cross. We don't keep putting him through that torment. He did it once for all of creation, for all of humanity. And what has Jesus done? What has Jesus already said? And we need to agree with that and begin to believe it and begin to play that story over and over and over again in our life. In your program is a connection card that looks like this. Just ask everybody to fill it out. If it's your first or second time, just check that. We make a donation to the Women's House on your behalf, the Women's Mission House. I checked on the mission. And there's some boxes to consider marking today, I actually checked sign me up for growth tracks. If you want to dedicate your kid, you can do that. But those first two are really important. I'm saying yes to Jesus today. And if you're in here saying, you know, I've been contemplating that, but the lies, they're just louder than Jesus' voice. And today, I want to say yes to Jesus and I want to ask the sound engineer to turn Jesus' voice up a little bit louder, turn the lies down a little bit. So Jared, could you work on that? Could turn the lies down, turn Jesus up back there on the faders? That would be really great. And if that's you saying, I want to say yes to him today, I want you to check that box. We want to walk with you in that journey. And then many of us, we've all walked through this season. If you're not ready to check this box today, you can probably say, I've been there. Is I need to read some scriptures to battle shame. Because some of you have some things in your life that you're just ashamed of. And sometimes the things that we're most ashamed of are the things that have been done to us. We didn't even do them. But somehow, it's like someone else did this evil to me, and I'm ashamed of it. I'm so embarrassed of it. And I want you to hear the voice of the Messiah, that same Messiah that wrote in the dust for that woman caught in adultery. And he just says, I'm sorry. That should have never happened to you. That should have never happened to you. And the embarrassment, the shame that you've been grabbing a hold of and walking with all of these years, that was never my story. That was never my story for your life. Today I want to change that story for you. And if you'd like to just read some scriptures this week that would help you work through the embarrassment, the shame of your past, we'd love to send that to you. But I believe that the story that maybe some of you have been playing in your head over and over again, that you're saying, yeah, even if I do check a box, I'm just going to repeat the past. It's just going to happen over and over again. It's just what my family does. It's what my dad did, my grandfather did, it's what we do. I am what I've done, and what they've done, what they've done, what they've done. And today Jesus wants to write a brand new story. And I believe that the shame that many of you have been walking in, I think it can be broken today. We could trust Jesus to say, okay, like that story where that son goes away and wastes all of dad's money, prodigal son, and then he comes back and you're just waiting for this whipping to happen, even if it's just like a verbal one. If you took all this money, you blew all of it, and instead the father runs after him, welcomes him home, throws a party, puts a robe on, a ring on his finger, sandals at his feet. Even at the risk of taking off the older brother, which did happen, even at the risk of that, of seeming unfair, seeming too extravagant, Jesus still said, I thought my son was gone, and now he's found. He once was dead, and now he's alive. And today we have the chance to rewrite that story. We have a loving and gracious Messiah who has a robe, a ring, some sandals, and a party ready to throw for us to say, no longer do we have to live in shame. I'm changing the story. Would you stand with me this morning? We're going to pray.